No, 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 no tienes nada que agradecer, Norma, al contrario, igual le digo a Ash, lo hago con mucho gusto y es una de las cosas que discutimos desde inclusive antes de que se echara a andar el movimiento pop, ¿no? La gran mayoría de ustedes probablemente no sepa, and I'm going to continue in English so that
yeah, sure, don't worry. Thank you.
We understand that the pop movement started here in Cuernavaca in 2016, and I was one of the people involved. I mean, I'm as guilty as Ash for the formation of the group.
To push Pachi.
And it was very, very nice, all these discussions we had with a very beautiful view of the Cuernavaca Valley and the mountains at the end of it. It was a very inspiring time we spent with Pachi, and all these things that I'm going to talk about are designed. The objective was to completely eliminate, to destroy all these lies, all these false arguments that had been used mainly by the oil and gas companies in order to make us believe that it was impossible to change to a different source of energy, which is completely false. But they had some, I think they still have some success, and now they are being supported also by people like the owner of Microsoft, like the first minister of Canada, and people like that who have a lot of power and who can change ideas very quickly. So I hope you enjoy what I'm going to say, because all these arguments are completely false. They should be thrown into the dustbin, and we have to, on the other side, we also have lots of things to do. Otherwise, they might, in the end, they might have some points in their favor, because if we don't do it quickly enough, then we will waste a very strong and beautiful opportunity to stop all these problems. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Antonio. This is a conversation that I believe is not only just very important. I think it's precious because it provides a certain perspective on the birth of the pop movement, like you said, the whole, the principles and the values that it embraces, and its raison d'être, which is, its reason for being. And I just want to say thank you so much for, providing that prelude to this conversation. And I want to start by conveying a very warm welcome to you, Antonio. And like you said, the pop movement started together while we spent a beautiful time in Cuernavaca with you and with Dad and Elio and, the pop family. That's where it was born. And I just want to say thank you for making the time, and a warm welcome to everyone who's joining us in this conversation, the Pop Leadership Conversation, a tribute to our chief mentor. This project aims to strengthen youth leadership and explore tactics that empower the youth to take action and tackle the most pressing environmental issues faced globally through action. And this is where the crux of the pop movement really is. And we are conducting a series of conversations on leadership strategies, recommendations, reflections, and examples, each focused on global leadership and a different pressing environmental issue. The initiative is designed and implemented as a tribute to our chief mentor, late Dr. R.K. Pachauri. Today, we have the greatest pleasure of speaking with Dr. Professor Antonio Galan, professor at the University Nacional Autónoma de Mexico, based in Cuernavaca, and again, very much a father of the pop movement. So I just want to say thank you so much, Antonio, and the whole family for being with us here. And I'll hand over to Anna. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ash, and thank you so much, Dr. Antonio, for being here with us. I'm very excited about this conversation. I think this a really interesting introduction. You talked about the pop movement. It's just a little sneak peek of how interesting the whole conversation will be. So thank you so much for joining us. And for everyone who's here with us and everyone who's watching us online, I'm gonna go ahead and introduce our guest speaker. Dr. Antonio Sarmiento Galan is a member of the Math Institute of the National Autonomous University of Mexico since 1999. Prior to his current appointment, he worked at the Astronomy Institute in Mexico for 18 years. Antonio has been interested in regional impacts of global warming since 2005. He offers a lecture course on anthropogenic global warming at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, both for undergraduate and graduate students. He also coordinates the Technical Committee on Energy and Global Warming at the Advisory State Council on Sustainability for the state of Morelos, Mexico. Thank you so much for being here with us today, and I'll hand it back to Dr. Ash, who will be asking you the first question.
Thank you, Anna. And I want to say Antonio is a precious and prestigious member of the board of the pop movement, which we're very honored by. And again, he has a certain vision, which is very unique because he was part of every step which led to the birth of the pop movement. So I think this conversation, like you pointed out, will be a very unique and special one, Antonio. And I just want to thank you once again, and to ask to get us jump started. We'd love to hear your thoughts in terms of a little bit of the context of the birth of the pop movement and what was envisioned for leadership, particularly from the youth perspective. As the pop movement has just celebrated its birthday on Earth Day in 22 after being born in 2016. So well into a half decade mark. We'd love to hear your thoughts, Antonio.
Thank you very much, Ash. Let me just ask you a favor. Please forget about all the academic titles and things like that. In Mexico, we have a problem with the title doctor because mainly it refers to a physician, and it's complicated. Well, in any case, I am not used to wearing all these titles and things like that. They are just very silly in the real meaning, and please forget about that. Just use Antonio, and also don't think I am also so old that you need to talk to me in a respectful way or anything like that. We're all human beings, and that will be all. And with respect to leadership, the problem is mainly that if you follow the definition, the most common definition is the state or position of being a leader, which is just going around the same definition. It's not defining the word, but going around using the same word to define it. So it's a very common mistake. But anyway, nowadays, it means having to be a leader means much, much more. It means that you have to be able for conducting tasks, forming ideals, preparing for the future, and lots of other things that come with this. It's very easily said quickly with just few words, but it involves a lot of work. And sometimes you have to work on different ways in order to be able to advance all you need to know and all you need to prepare in order to propose some interesting ideas on how to proceed with all these huge problems we now have in front of us.
Absolutely, that's so true. I think that that's probably that is the key reason for establishing the pop movement, because we have a situation where we're confronted with probably one of the biggest existential challenges of our time, and we need action. And I think that action is real leadership. So I just want to say thank you for sharing that, Antonio, and I hope that we'll all be able to exemplify it, certainly through the work that we do at the pop movement. I still remember the time when the curriculums were being written, but the whole idea is youth inspired by knowledge. And I think we have to understand that sadly, we also live in a time where we've got a severe pandemic of, or infodemic as it's called, of misinformation, like you pointed out right at the start of our conversation. And it's very important that we align ourselves with accurate information and the science, and be guided by that. And I think that that's really what we're driven to do. Our hope is that all young people around the world will understand the science, understand that there are opportunities, that the time is now, and that we all take action to protect our planet, and we'll definitely get there. So thank you so much, Antonio, for getting us started on this really important positive note. And with that, I'm going to ask Anna to take over, please. Thank you. Guide us through.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed what you said, what your answer I thought was really, really interesting, especially it's easier said than done, right? We can describe it, but once we put it into action, that's where the real word comes. And now I would like to hand it over to Ivan, who will be asking the next question.
Thank you so much, Anna. So the question is, we already have the technologies to reach a low emissions future. What is needed for these technologies to be widely implemented? That's the first. So also, is it corporate or government interests, or price, or jobs? And how can we lower and diminish green premiums, as it has been done in renewable energy production?
Thank you, Ivan. It's a very long answer I'm going to give you, because there are many, many things, and it's more than a question. I think what is needed is a change of the actual economic system. We need to change it for one in which fossil fuels are left underground, one where money is irrelevant for the common good, and where all the services like education, health, housing, food, etc., are provided by organized communities and coordinated by a new state whose structure has been decided by selected members of the communities and whose aim is to reach the common good. Okay? Something like, for example, and it's not impossible, sounds like a huge task, something impossible to accomplish in this economic system, but that's not true. That's also one of the lies that we have to forget. The Bhutan, the country, I'm going to forget about the system, the governmental system, because it's a kingdom, but it's a very special kingdom, so forget about the adjective. In Bhutan, the performance of the leaders is evaluated by the people in terms of happiness. Okay, they have the gross national happiness index to evaluate everything. It's a country that has enforced a plastic ban, a real one, from April the 1st, 2019. Bhutan ranked first in the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, which is a huge association for all of Asia. And the first place was in economic freedom, ease of doing business, peace and lack of corruption, and has a net negative greenhouse gas emission. That's because the small amount of pollution it creates is absorbed by the forest that covers most of the country. Okay, so it's a very peculiar place in a very remote place in the world, but it's something that can be done, okay, even with countries surrounding it, which are completely following the mainstream of capitalism. Of course, we also need to get rid of the fossil fuel empire and also all its petropolitics, okay? This empire has been formed by a group of several oil and gas corporations who refuse to stop burning them. Okay? And as of 2022, sufficiency of energy from renewable sources is possible and affordable. That's another of the lies that we have to get rid of, the insufficient energy involved in all these things. It's the other way around. And if implemented fast enough, it would also save us money. Okay? In the mid-1990s, that decade, when it was already clear that visible air pollution was only part of the problem, and that it had also been understood that the invisible gas produced by combustion, CO2 or carbon dioxide, represented an even broader threat. Mark Jacobson showed that it was possible to get rid of 60% of the coal in the US with a modest number of wind turbines. And in 2009, together with Mark DeLucci, they showed that hydroelectric, wind, and solar energy could possibly supply enough energy to satisfy all the world energy needs. All the names I am mentioning, I have the original art papers they wrote and how the calculations have been performed to show that what the reality is, and not just to believe arguments which don't have any meaning or any base on which to work. The further work in 2015 showing that although the sun goes down every night and the wind is very fickle, wind and solar power could keep the electricity grid going, okay? And the secret is obvious. There has been an enormous amount of research and advances in the storage of energy, and there are many alternatives to that, so that the fluctuating sources are not anymore a problem for maintaining continuous supply of energy. Time has been proving them right. Some nations, including Iceland, Costa Rica, Namibia, and Norway, are already producing more than 90% of their electricity from clean sources. General Electric, one of the main symbols of capitalism, routinely erects windmills about 3 times the height of the Statue of Liberty. And in August, a Chinese company announced a new model that generates enough power for 20,000 homes. In another work, Jacobson states that the US has 95% of the technology required to produce 100% of its energy needs from renewable energy by 2035, while maintaining a safe and reliable electrical grid. Okay, I'm using their words, so I have to be very careful with what I say they said, because otherwise I may be accused of inventing or saying false statements, okay? As availability is concerned, Dione Farmer has shown that since the first practical application of solar electricity, most of you were not born yet, but it was in 1985. The satellite was the Vanguard 1 satellite. was the first use of solar cells to get the energy needed for the satellite to work. And its costs since then, since 1958, has been steadily declining due to constant incremental improvement. Every time the number of solar panels manufactured is doubled, the cost of them falls by 30%, which means that currently it is failing by 10% every year. It's falling, sorry, by 10% every year. So it's very, very cheap now. As probably you remember that I have photovoltaic cells in my roof. It's now more than 15 years that I have been generating the energy, the electric energy of my home, and also every other energy need. For example, because I don't burn any gas at home. We cook with an electric cook, and the amount I paid for the system, which was, my house is in a very prone to electrical discharges because we're very close to the Sierra. And I said, I mean, if I'm going to spend all my savings in one of these things, I want to spend them in something which I can at least recover by the warranty terms, some of the money I'm investing. So I went for the best system available at that time. And now the same system is less than 1/4 of what I paid for that system. Okay, so that gives you an idea that in 15 years, prices have gone down to 1/4 of what they used to be. On the other hand, you have that price of coal has remained almost the same over the last 140 years. Okay, so if there is any problem with things being expensive, it's with fossil fuels, not with alternative energies or energies coming from renewable sources. Now, the cost, another thing is the cost of the transition. Okay? And this is precisely the opposite of how we have considered the energy transition. In 2021, Bill Gates wrote a book arguing that consumers would have to pay a green premium for clean energy because it would be more expensive. But a few months later, Emily Gruber, an engineer at Georgia Tech in the United States as well, has recently shown that it would cost less to replace all of the country's coal plants with renewables. It could cost less than it would be to maintain existing coal plants, something that would be called a green discount, okay, in terms of greening or qualifying things with the green adjective. Steady price declines mean we could still move fast enough to meet the target set out in the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement. During COP26, for another friend, Kingsmill Bond, who has been working for the Carbon Tracker Initiative in London and for the Rocky Mountain Institute, both groups working on energy transition, the numbers in Farmers' report imply that we will have to build an electricity grid for bringing in all the new energy and installing millions of electric vehicle chargers and things like that. Okay. Now, the other advantage of these new alternatives is that you build the system for converting the electricity, for converting the energy very close to the place in where you're going to consume it. There is no need for long distribution lines, which have many problems and which all the time are having or creating artificial problems in order just for the owners of these companies to increase the amount of the electricity they supply. But this time it is much easier to build the conversion plants very close to the place in which the energy is going to be used. You don't need to transport it for a long, long distance, which, by the way, was one of the things that decided the change from alternate current and electric current. If you study a little bit of the history of electricity, that was a very silly thing, which actually led to the creation of the electric chair and many other mentally disturbing inventions from the human being using electricity. Well, if that thing is done, we would need 1 billion a year in additional capital expenditures for the next 2 or 3 decades. And that's a calculation which is very precise. But in return, we would save about 2 billion a year in fossil fuel rents. The rents is something that nobody discusses because it's the difference between the cost of production and the selling price. That's what the investors in oil keep and pocket, okay? So that's why the opposition is so fierce. They don't want to lose all these very easy to gain and easy to keep fortunes. And that's the reason behind their arguments, but it's not a scientific argument. Okay? Bond insists that the high projections for the cost of the energy transition, actually, there is a problem here with the famous McKinsey firm. They predicted it would cost billions more than farmers' steam because they ignored these trends, and also they assume that before long, renewable energy will be siphoned off of the steeply falling cost curve. Okay, that's something which we have to, and we have the elements. It's just a matter of following the statistics of the markets. That curve is one of the main discoveries that has been recently acknowledged by everybody. And it means that once an item goes or is safely included into this curve, it will continue with the price declining every certain amount of time, okay? It's like the other laws that have come to exist in the recent future in terms of, for example, the duplication of transistors. When the transistor was the first electronic part of systems that were very, very cheap to build and very easy to port around. Okay, I don't know. Probably you don't remember how big radios have to be in order to accumulate all these bulbs, which play the same paper, that very small, tiny in comparison of all these electronic new equipment. And that was a huge step by civilization, but it also was a very interesting thing that every time that the number of transistors doubled, the price of them fell by a certain amount.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
There are many things around this that we could discuss and are very interesting.
Yes, thank you. In fact, I think we wanted to seek your thoughts on, how this transition can happen in other economies. And let me pass it back to Anna, who help us progress with the question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ash. And Anthony, that was really, really interesting. I think you touched on many interesting points, including the oil and gas sector and the pressures they put into not promoting the transition and the technologies we already have. So that's really interesting. And I agree with Kevin, who writes in the chat that you should write a book about all of this, because all of this information is so interesting. And I think a big issue is that many people out there don't have access to learning about this. So interesting. And I would like to hand it over to Edgar, who will be asking the next question. And as Ash says, this is related more to how these technologies can improve our livelihoods. So Edgar, if you can hear me, you may go ahead with your question. It looks like you're muted, Edgar. I don't know if there's an issue with your connectivity. If not, I'll go ahead and ask the question for him just in case. Oh, there you go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry. It says that my connection is very unstable this morning. But yeah, nice to meet you, Dr. Sarmiento. So my question is, how can the implementation of these technologies have a positive impact on the livelihoods of people living in developing countries, especially in the short term?
Okay, well, the first and main problem of the Western economic system is that it is it involves criminal financing. Okay, the climate movement is increasingly clashing with banks that provide loans for the expansion of fossil fuel infrastructure. Last year, the International Energy Agency said such expansion must end immediately if we are to meet the Paris goals, the Paris Agreement goals. But the world's biggest banks continue to lend for new pipelines and drilling wells. So that's one of the main problems. Of course, there is some other things associated with these loans, which is that as the risk increases, which is the general behavior of risks in a world under increasing temperature, the always increasing greed of the capitalistic system. In Glasgow, also during the last COP, Mohamed Nasheed, the former president of the Maldives and current chairman of the People's Majlis, that's a nation legislative body. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Maldives, but it's an archipelago. It's a very small islands straddling the equator in the Indian Ocean. It is just as many islands in that Pacific Ocean. It is just a few meters above sea level, okay? And it is not only that they have very small and very weak, let's say very fragile sources of fresh water. And it is not that the ocean level has increased so much as to completely inundate these islands. The problem is that it has increased enough to go under the soil and contaminate the fresh water sources they have. And he has, at the COP26, he said that poor countries have gone deeply into debt trying to cope with the effects of global warming. If they need to move an airport or a shore, or increase the height of levees, or recover from a devastating hurricane or a record rain, the loan may be the only recourse. And borrowing becomes much more difficult every time, in parts because climate risks mean lenders demand much more. The climate premium on loans can approach 10%, but Nasheed said that some nations are already spending 20% of their budgets just paying interests. Okay, so it's a circular a very vicious argument, and every time they know that they know they are buying the countries little by little, let's say, but at the same time, it's all part of the same economic system. Okay, in short terms, what he was suggesting is that it might be time for a debt strike by poor nations. And I completely agree. Not only by poor nations, all these debts have the same identifier, I mean, the same problem, which they have been lent by the nation who won the battles, for example. I don't know if you remember, well, obviously you didn't, even I wasn't born yet, but during the Second World War, there existed a plan, the Marshall Plan, in which the winning nation, the United States, because the war wasn't fought in the United States, it was fought in many other countries, they lent money to all the countries which asked for it, but they never sold that money. That money was used to pay for the goods that the US were going to send them in order for them to recover, okay? So they had the ability to produce these things. They had the workers, many of them Mexican workers, and they also had they knew that the other countries had the need to do that. So it was the best example of how capitalism works. Okay, I know you have a need, so I'm going to take advantage of that. And it doesn't matter to me what kind of problems, so if even I kill you, I'm going to apply it because that's how I like it, the system to be, okay? So it's a very strong argument. And of course, everybody rose from their seats and applauded him, but he was only one of the many island countries which exist in the Pacific Ocean. And soon everybody forgot about these things. You know, well, the COP26 was a complete failure in terms of specifying any ways for real action against global warming.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, Edgar, I don't know if you would like to add anything. If so, go ahead. But I just wanted to thank you for bringing that up, Edgar, for that great question, and Dr. Sarmiento for that amazing answer. I think it's really interesting to put into perspective how this issue is not only affecting the people and the economy of the nation, but it's also limiting its development, right? So I think it was a great answer that you mentioned, and it really, well, you told us the numbers, right? About 20% of their budgets going into these interests. And now I would like to hand it over to Kevin, who will be asking the next question.
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, I'm impressed with all your knowledge. I'm really, really impressed. And also, I want to say that I'm really glad to meet someone who is really humble. The thing that you talk about, that taking off the titles and being a normal person and talking with you. And I think that's really important. And together, being humble and teaching how you're doing, and I suggest make a book. I think this is what we need to make right now in the world. And with this comes my question. So, as you know, we have no time left to do really big things, but in this case, we are living. I'm in Mexico. I'm a developing country, and my question is: how can developed countries who have the latest technologies and the resources can work hand in hand to help developing countries to make sure they transition to lower emission technologies in a faster, obviously, and better accepted way?
Okay, sorry, please forget about the adjectives. It is not the fact that I know a lot of things and I am very, the main thing is that this is something anybody especially anybody in the pop movement, can do with enough time. And that's what I now have. So I'm using it to do this kind of research. It's just reading other people's work. It's like the IPCC used to work. They didn't do any research directly. They just compile sources of scientific well-done work, and they read them very carefully. They were pretty hard evaluated, and those accepted are then published in the IPCC reports. But that's all that needs to be done. The work is being done in different places on the earth, and those are very different resources that we have at hand and that we just use to compile. Okay. Now, according to that, what I think it's one of the most important things for we all, regardless of whether it's small countries or developing countries or anything like that, is the following. Best and most needed is to stop polluting the air and consequently the water and the soil. Okay? Once in the air, pollution can travel around the world, contaminating everything. The World Health Organization considers that every year, almost 9 million premature deaths occur due to the polluted air, okay? And a fact that has not been mentioned because it's not for the business that are involved in this, the use of medicines, and in this case, vaccines, is in 2020, fossil fuel pollutions killed 3 times as many people as COVID-19 did, okay? So that's one of the things that it's published, it's recognized by the World Health Organization. So it's already there, but it didn't receive any attention in the media. Why? Because the media are completely controlled. The massive media are completely controlled by the system. So that's something very, one of the other things that we need to learn how to avoid these false sources and start going to the generators of the information, to the basic sources, and read this information, okay? So far, rich countries have not even provided the climate funds they promised for the global south more than a decade ago, let alone any compensation for the ongoing damage they have tried most hard to cause, okay? And let me give you another set of, well, a couple of data that are very clear. All of sub-Saharan Africa, which means more than 2/3 of the population in Africa, is responsible for less than 2% of the carbon emissions that currently warm the earth. Okay, this is emissions since the emissions started, not the last year, not by a definite period or anything like that. Is since the emissions started with the so-called Industrial Revolution, this problem has started, and sub-Saharan Africa have only emitted 2% of these emissions, okay? The US, on the other hand, is responsible for 25% of these emissions. Okay? So that gives you an idea of how unbalanced the responsibilities are and how we should proceed. Okay, there is a company which is called EcoEquity, led by another friend whose name is Tom Athanasiou. He has done the most detailed analysis of who owes what in the climate fight. Okay, he found that the US would have to cut its emissions by 175%, something which is obviously unrealizable. Okay. But that was in order to offset the damage it has already caused. So that meant that the US would have to stop completely doing anything that could produce any kind of emissions. So the only way it can meet that burden is to help the rest of the world bear the costs that global warming has already produced. Okay? To sort of evaluate the damage and try to help the countries that have suffered most by these damages. Okay? Now, the present job of decarbonization will only be embraced by people if the global South sees it as a part of a package that includes adaptation aid and disaster relief. Otherwise, it will just be like all the other promises they have done, rich countries, and never have applied in any sense. Okay? So we have to be very careful with all these things. And there are many more reasons that I would like to mention, but I don't know if we have still time to do that.
We have a couple.
I think we lost Anna there.
Yeah.
But yes, we can take a couple more minutes on this question, and then we have a final question, please, Antonio. And this is so interesting. Thank you.
No, that's okay. Let's go to the final question, and if there is more time, I will come back to this.
Okay, sure. I think Anna was going to wanted to ask that one, but let me ask on Anna's behalf. What can the youth do to promote a quicker transition, and what roles do the voices and opinions of the youth have in implementing these technologies, please? Thank you. Oh yes, Anna's back. Thank you.
Thank you, Ash. Well, I think the way to proceed has already been shown, even in the US. Our Children's Trust has prepared the best and most detailed legal, which is a terrible task to do, but they have used all the legal problems and all the legal ways to try to solve this problem by suing their government. Okay, so that's one of the first things they should have to do. They have to start suing their governments. Our Children's Trust and many other organizations are helping youth to get to know in detail their laws, because every country has different laws, and how to proceed in order for the lawyers not to stop this way to proceed, because they always try to find very small legalistic details and stop all the procedures, even if they recognize that youth has the reason. So that's a very interesting thing to do. And obviously the second one is that they will soon have the opportunity to participate in the election of their heads of state. And they need to be prepared for the huge responsibility that comes with voting. Okay, so they also have to be informed on all the corporations that have been buying governments in their countries in order to continue burning fossil fuels. And besides sharing this information, they also have to stop consuming whatever these corporations produce. Most of them things that nobody needs, mainly because it is our money that keeps these corporations killing us. So we are also accomplices in these problems. If we keep buying things that we don't need, but we believe we are considered something else because we have them, we are only helping these corporations to continue their burning of fossil fuels and consequently killing us little by little. The main problem here is the social reconfiguration, okay? According to Oxfam at the Institute for the European Environmental Policy, in 1990, the richest 1% of the population was responsible for 13% of the global CO2 per capita consumption emissions. Okay, 1% was responsible for 13% of the emissions. That's also a consequence of the economic system. In 2015, when 37% of the richest 1% were US citizens, their emissions grew to 15%, okay? They increased even 2% more and are predicted to increase to 16% by 2030. Okay? That's something unbearable. According to Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, it is essential to eliminate this ranked injustice and inequality now, not tomorrow, now. And by that, I mean, he was a very deliberative person when he entered the UN Secretary. He used to consider all points of view, all these arguments. In a very short time, he has been convinced that there is only one way, and that means what we have been discussing, the end of fossil fuel burning. In general, we all need to change, okay? For example, environmentalists are very sad because they don't want to accept a degraded landscape with turbines or photovoltaic farms. Okay? Nobody does, but it is something that is completely acceptable if we compare it to the notion that tackling the climate crisis would force massive changes in the way people live. Okay? That means changing the way all live on this planet. Every time the rise of electric vehicles is written about, Twitter responds immediately that it would be better to ride bicycles and electric buses, which is completely clear. I mean, nobody discusses that. In many ways, we would be, and thankfully, some cities have already started to build extensive bike lanes and electric bus rapid transit lanes. As 2017, the problem is that only 2% of passenger kilometers, that's the distance measured by every passenger in countries like the US, come from public transport. That's only 2%, okay? Cycling trips have doubled in the last 2 decades to about 1% of the total. But we could and should quintuple the number of people who commute by bike and bus. And even then, we would need to replace tens of millions of cars with electric vehicles to reach the goals and the time scientists have set to reach them. One very recent problem was the renovation of all the postal services in the United States, the renovation of the vehicles they use to deliver all the mail in the US, okay? And they decided to buy the worst, most contaminating brand of vehicles to do that. Something which is completely contrary to whatever kind of reasoning that you could use, okay? They have, and they already have proven them, they have the electric vehicles to do that, to deliver all the mail in the United States. Why they don't continue that transition and finish that overall, and the US Postal Service becomes the first in the world that doesn't contaminate at all. But that's one of the things in which you can see very clearly the appliance of petropolitics in the terms, in the decisions that activate all of other things in our lives, okay? We have to change lots of things. And for example, we have to change the consumer preferences, the settlement patterns, the eating habits we all have, and reconfigure them all in a very short period of time. Okay, that's what seems to be one of the main tasks we have to do. So one way to look at the work that needs to be done with the tools at hand is like triage. If we do it fast, we will open up more possibilities for generations to come. Farmer says, it is possible to see the cost of nuclear fusion reactors starting to drop steeply down the cost curve. And imagine that within a generation or two, people may be removing solar panels from agricultural fields because fusion, which is essentially the physics of the sun brought to Earth, may be providing all the energy we need. Okay, this is something that we already know it's working, it's feasible. It has nothing to do with what we actually know as nuclear reactors, which is the opposite, that's fission, not fusion. And it has not been explored enough, but we need to start doing this research and try to improve its outcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow.
Great.
Anna, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate everything you've said, but especially talking about fusion in this last couple of minutes. I think it's so interesting that you bring it up because it's a really interesting solution that could be implemented, and I hope it gets researched and everything more. And what you were saying about the youth and how we can get involved, choosing the politicians who will promote safer and more sustainable policies. I think that was also very interesting. And I will hand it over to Ash so he can also add some conclusions.
Thank you. I just want to say that this has been just you know, I don't know how many minutes or an hour plus of the most sort of loaded with knowledge conversation. And, you know, I think we've taken away a whole gamut of, you know, opportunities, challenges, and directions that we can all take. But I think, you know, what you talked about, Antonio, was the fact that we need to make a lot of changes in our lives. You know, the values we embrace, the actions we take with respect to what we're going to do in terms of our diets, our choices, like you said, our ability to vote the right people into power so decisions are made to support us to progress in the right direction. And I think you know, what is really interesting is that this conversation has shared so much knowledge and science to guide us. And I don't believe that a single conversation actually does justice. We would definitely want to continue the conversation with you, Antonio. And I think you've given us a lot of food for thought, a lot to chew on in terms of, I think this is the kind of diet we definitely need. But I think, you know, there's a lot of things that all of us need to understand and then implement in our lives. And irrespective of the field of work we were to adopt, the important thing is I think these values need to guide us. You shared so much with us today, and I just want to thank you for being a precious part of the POP family, for providing us the vision which has got us started. And I'd like to also continue to seek your insights as we make progress. So if you would to agree, we'd like to have another conversation with you, please, and hopefully many more. I just think there's a lot for us to learn. I think there are many people who will want to spend more time also in conversation with you. So we'd like to invite other members of the POP family too. But I just as we conclude this conversation, want to say that your time and insight is absolutely invaluable. And thank you once again for being a precious part of the family. And I want to thank all the the family that are with us here right now, also for the important questions, because it's stimulated a conversation, and that's key and critical. But I also hope a lot of action and guidance in the many projects I know each one of us here is implementing. Many of you are looking at eco technologies. I hope we'll have a chance for some conversation on what those projects are about, what Antonio's thoughts and guidance would be for us to make progress. And also, Anna, for you to share more about Vidu. Sam, for you to share a lot more in terms of the mobilization and education that you're leading on the ground, not just in Nigeria, but throughout Africa. And of course, Hermano, the power of music and art. I just want to say that Antonio is also at the heart of everything that's happened with the festival, the Cinema Planet Festival, which happens in it's a global festival, but it's hosted, and it's a major event which mobilizes literally every stakeholder across definitely Cuernavaca, but also the state. So I think the power of that art and media is also very key, and I'm sure Hermano Edgar will have a lot to talk to Antonio about. So with that, I just want to convey, our love and our gratitude, our respect, and our greatest thanks for your time, insight, and a lot for us to learn and ponder before we meet again. And before we close, I'd like very much for us to, for those who can, switch on their camera so we can take a picture. I have sent Antonio a few screenshots, but for everybody to turn on the camera so we can save this among many moments we'll spend together with Antonio in conversation and action. Thank you, Drisha.
Thank you very much, Ash. Just let me add two things. One is the fact that yesterday or the day before that, the Washington Post published a very interesting article, a research article, on how eating beef is killing the Amazonian. Okay, it's a very careful research. It goes against all the millionaires that are involved with the actual president of Brazil, and all the money that is involved in killing everything in the Amazonia, including killing all the people in the world. And not only people, but also many other species. We are responsible for that, and we would be paying just our bad behavior, let's say, but we are going to finish with many other species that are completely innocent. And the other thing is that I would also like to express my gratitude to all of you who have been attentive to what I have to say. And I hope you have the curiosity to go and read the original research, because it's very valuable. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Abrazos, and Antonio. I'll be in touch with you if I may. We'll set up another day for a follow-up conversation. But I think you've given us so much insight, and you're absolutely right that we're killing the lungs of our planet. These are very stark facts, and you've shared with us, and I hope some of the indigenous communities we're working with would also be able to join the conversation that we have, conversations we have going forward, because there's a great attempt to, on behalf of several communities where the pop movement is concerned, and I think your insights will count a lot in terms of guiding us with follow-up and next steps. And I just want to say thank you so much. This has been truly special and precious at so many levels. And abrazos, and thank you all so much for the time. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Antonio. This was great. I learned so much in this session. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Have a good day.
you.
Evening.
Thank you.
Don't work too much.